Okay, so about a week and a half ago, I decided to make a video talking about what I believe to be the best decks for the Set 2 meta. And you guys seem to really like that video, so I decided that now that we have all the information of all the cards that are going to exist for the entire meta for Cardfight Vanguard Zero in the month of May, that it was time to update that video and give you guys a true tier list of all the decks that exist in this meta. Let's get started. Oh, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy, TrueChampionSteven, and we are back with another Vanguard Zero video for you guys today, and I'm super excited because we hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm super happy, and this goes out to each and every one of you that watched the last Best Decks for Set 2 video, everyone that was watching the challenge videos, everyone that comes into the streams. Thank you all so very much. A more proper celebration video will be coming out this Saturday. Get ready, because it's going to be one of the most hyped videos I've ever going to record, and I'm super excited for you guys to see it. But that's not what this video is about. I'm very happy, but it's not what this video is about. Let's go ahead and talk about what's going down in this video. So, if you guys remember the last time I did a meta analysis for Cardfight Vanguard Zero, what I did was I showed you guys all the new cards that were going to come out, and I talked about their matchups, and I kind of gave a brief overview of what I thought the best decks were going to be. However, I was very wrong about what cards were going to come out. It turns out that we actually have an extra set in the Set 3 cards with Dimension Blaze, Pale Moon, Dark Irregulars, as well as all the other decks that I talked about, but an even more special thing that's happening right now, today, Tuesday, May 5th, the Spike Brothers Clan event has officially launched in Cardfight Vanguard Zero, so we have another new Dark Zone deck to talk about today. So we're going to cover all these decks, all their archetypes. I'm going to talk about each and every one of them in terms of their skills and powers and playability against other different decks, and then at the very end of the video, the last part of the video, we're going to do an actual tier list ranking for every archetype that exists in this meta for the month of May of Cardfight Vanguard Zero Global. So if you guys are excited, please be sure to let me know that by leaving a like on this video, subscribing to the channel, and clicking that bell for notifications, so that way you guys know when my videos go live for you. I do all kinds of Pokemon and Vanguard Zero content here on the channel, and I definitely recommend you guys stick around and have some fun. This video is going to be insane. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into what all these new cards do that I didn't know about last time. Alright guys, here we are at the Vanguard Zero meta database that I used in the last episode to talk about the cards that are coming out or the cards that exist already, and I'm going to use it the same in this video as well. Let's go ahead and head over to database. This is the part that we care about, and go over to Dimension Police. This is the first clan that I want to talk about. It came out in Set 3. It's actually, I think, the biggest collection of cards in the Set 3 one, if I'm not mistaken, but I think they're all equal actually if I think about it. But anywho, this one is probably going to be the most popular out of the three that came out in Set 3 of DI, Dark Irregulars, Pale Moon, and Dimension Police here. And the reason for that is that this is a really popular clan in terms of the anime. There's a character that uses it that's really hype and people seem to love a lot. And the big cards that came out of this set are Super Dimensional Robot Ayusha, Enigma Storm, and of course, the best card in the deck in my opinion, Commander Laurel. So let's first things first talk about what Dimension Police kind of does. So first things first, it's basically another gigantic robot deck like Nova Globbers, but instead of being very rear guard and stand and pressure focused, it's kind of combo-y based, and then it uses that combo to achieve power for the Vanguard to achieve extra criticals, extra effects, and it really is a Vanguard focused type deck. You try and pump up your Vanguard with power so that way it can achieve certain skills and gain effects through that, and then you use those effects to kind of create advantage or pressure against your opponent to win the game. So basically, it's like a Megazord, you know, a bunch of little guys come together to help with the big guy that tries to take out the opponent. Really simple. And that's very evident through the effect here of Dayusha. Vanguard, when it attacks, if its power was 14,000 or greater before attacking, this unit gets critical +1. So basically, there are cards like Cosmo Great here, which counterblast 2, add 4k to your Vanguard, that lets them achieve that 14k power gap to then achieve an extra critical to then pressure the opponent and win the game a lot faster. That's the idea here with him. Similarly, Enigma Storm has the exact same effect. He says 15,000 or greater, but because he's a ride chain, if you have Enigman Wave in the Soul, who's his like grade 2 version, he gets power +1k, so he's 11k base. So it still just needs +4k power to achieve the same critical. The reason why Enigman Storm is better than Dayusha at the moment, or more popular, is because he has 11k base. I'll talk more about that later, but basically those are the two main boss grade 3s that exist in the deck right now, and there's other ones like Enigman Rain for like a cheapo version of the deck, or Miracle Beauty as a really powerful rear guard. There's lots of neat options in the deck, but really it's Vanguard focused, and the two big Vanguards are Enigman Storm and Dayusha. Here's Enigman Wave. This is the grade 2 of the ride chain. Here's Cosmo Peak, a really powerful grade 2. It's the same thing as Cosmo Great, but it's a grade 2 with 9k power. As a buff, it used to be 8k. Fun fact. There's Cosmo Roar, which is rest, give something 2k, you can give it to your Vanguard. There's Diamond Ace, their PG, and here's Commander Lore, which is probably their best card, or best grade 1 at the very least. Fun fact about him, he used to be 4k in the original game. In this game, he's 7k. You'll see why that's a big deal right now. Rearguard, when your Vanguard's attack hits, rest 4 of your rearguards and stand your Vanguard. Now, if you don't think this is busted, it is, because in Vanguard Zero, it doesn't matter, you can always hit. And so if you can guarantee hit your opponent with a crit when they're at 2 damage and restand and then swing again, if they don't have a PG in their hand, they just die because you got hit twice by a thing that has a guaranteed crit. So that's really cool about Laurel. Another thing too is that if you have a full board of 5 units, you can actually have another rearguard standing up while you swing twice with your Vanguard. So you can actually get 2 attacks or achieve like a swing at a rearguard to get rid of an intercept and then swing twice with your Vanguard for a guaranteed hit. The reason why Laurel is really good too is that it gives you extra drive checks. You get 4 drive checks in 1 turn, which if you guys can imagine is really, really powerful. And yeah, so the idea of the general consensus here is that you play, the best version of the deck is you play Enigma Flow for the ride chain power of Enigma Ripple, and then you go to Enigma Wave, and then Enigma Storm, and then you use Enigma Storm plus some cards like Cosmo Greats, Cosmo Beak, Die Lady, Grander to achieve the power threshold to get that extra critical, and then through using that extra critical, you pressure your opponent. That's the main idea of the deck. It's very beat sticky, it's very aggressive, it's kind of Razor-esque in how much power it has and how it kind of works. Like, we know Razor's is a good deck, so why wouldn't this be also just as good? I will say one big downside to this deck is that it doesn't have any cards that draw besides Enigma and Wave, and even then you still need to commit cards in order to actually achieve a draw, so it's not really a +1, it's more just like a net 0 most of the time. So being able to kind of like get hard card draw is a big problem for this deck, and when you're a combo-based pieces deck, that can be a problem, which I should say is another reason why the ride chain is really good, because the ride chain pretty much works with only 1 card. All you need is the grade 1 and the grade 0, and boom, you get a grade 2 and then a grade 3 potentially on your ride. So the ride chain adds extra consistency to the deck when maybe it didn't have any. So that's another really good reason why it's popular. So I would say that while this deck is very aggressive, it's not necessarily as consistent as Razor's. There are points though when you don't need to obviously go for your criticals and you can like control your opponent's board and then push for game later. That's still like a pick and choose type of thing. It's unlike Razor's, which is always aggressive all the time with a permanent crit. So yeah, while I personally love Dimension Police and I cannot wait until they get more support in the future, right now they may be the best version of the decks coming out of set 3, but that might not be saying too much. I'll get to more about like where this deck fits in the meta and in terms of its matchups once we talk about the actual tier list itself. But moving on to the second deck that came out in the third set, Demonic Invasion, Dark Irregulars. Personally, my favorite of the 3 in terms of IRL decks. However, it is probably the worst one as of right now. And there's a very good reason for that. So there's no pictures here apparently of these cards, but the big grade these that came out are Dimmerworld Marquis Amon, Edel Rose, and No Life King Death Anchor. First things first, your main boss is No Life King Death Anchor here, which if you guys don't know what Dark Irregulars try and do, they achieve a gigantic soul, or they soul charge cards to kind of get the soul to be a big number, and then through having the soul become a big number, they can achieve other effects or even gain power. For example, here, No Life King Death Anchor has the effect at the start of your main phase, soul charge 1, and it gets plus 2,000 power until end of turn. And then he has an effect that says when it attacks a Vanguard, if you have 5 or more cards in your damage zone, you can put all your cards in your damage zone into your soul. If you put cards into your soul, this unit gets power plus 10k and 1 critical until end of turn. Very similar to how the Dayusha deck kind of pressures with crits, this one does too, but it only happens if you have 5 or more cards in your damage zone. That's why this card's kind of bad, is that your opponent can kind of control you, and it's kind of like a really late game base card. And there's the pictures loading up a little late there. It's okay, it's okay. Chrome is just lagging, that's fine, that's fine. But with that being said, what about the other cards? You got cards like Edel Rose, which is basically just a Gancelot clone for a card called Werewolf Seeker, which is the grade 2 10k, which is right here, Werewolf Seeker right here. And that's really great, but then you have cards like Marquis Amma, who's a double rare, and 11k by the way. He used to be 10k in the real game. During your turn, this unit gets plus 1k for each card in soul. So this is an example of what I'm talking about, of how cards can like gain power or gain extra effects through the sheer number of cards in your soul. And that's really cool. If it was Vanguard Rearguard, it'd be really good. Counterblast 1 and put 1 of your rearguards in your soul, and retire 1 of your opponent's back row rearguards at random. So it's basically like a 1-for-1 for back rows. So if you retire a grade 3 for a grade 1, that's actually a really good trait because boosters are super value in this game. I said that time and time again on my videos. But yeah, those are like the main grade 3s. You also have Demon Eater and you have Steel Vampire, who are 2 Mega Blasters. And in a deck that soul charges a lot, you can actually achieve these really often. I think the best one is Demon Eater. You just retire all your opponent's rearguards. Same thing as Lorengrin. And then in terms of grade 2s, all they really have is like Win the Ripper in terms of like juicy stuff. Otherwise, they just have a bunch of cards like Soul Charge and Werewolf Seeker, who's just generic. And this is basically a Berserk Dragon clone. So the problem that I have with Dark Irregulars isn't that they like have a bad mechanic. Soul Charging is really good. I will say it gets a little bit of a shaft in this game. I'll explain more why later, but the idea here is still valid. Like, they achieve everything they want. They Soul Charge plenty of cards, but right now they don't really have that many cards, or grade 3s or grade 2s even, that use that soul, that benefit from having such a big soul. So they're lacking a lot of their key power cards, which they will get later on in the future with Blade Ring Reiji, but right now it's kind of a little underwhelming what the deck can do, and really there's no one way to build it. And I'll talk more later about this, but it kind of just doesn't beat anything in terms of the matchups that exist. Like, if you get a little lucky, sure, you can beat stuff, but you Soul Charge your triggers, you don't really have a good grade 3 option to ride on your turn. It's kind of bad. I will say, though, really quickly, that one saving grace it might have is that it's probably the best deck to use for character fights, because if you guys did not know, the cards in your damage zone don't go back until the end of your turn. So if you use a No Love King Death Anchor deck against the character fights, you can guarantee the 4 damage or less thing. As long as you end the game with this card, you'll have 0 damage. So you'll technically win the game with 4 damage or less. So that's a really neat way to kind of achieve that restriction or that achievement. Which is super nice. So yeah, other than that, though, the deck is kind of meh in terms of playability, in terms of power, and it's not really that popular either. So you kind of are already gonna get an idea of where I think this deck goes in the tier list, but we'll do more of that stuff in a bit. Moving on, we probably have the second most popular deck or archetype that exists in the set 3 here, and that's going to be, of course, Pale Moon. Personally, I do love a lot of the Pale Moon cards that we got. Classic Pale Moon cards are really cool, very circusy, very fun. And much like Dark Irregulars, they actually revolve their strategies around Soul Charging, but less so. Like Dark Irregulars basically want to accumulate a gigantic soul to achieve effects or achieve power gain. Pale Moon wants to have basically a soul as their like extra hand, or a toolbox basically, where they'll want to superior call cards out of the soul to gain extra attacks, or better yet, maintain their proper battle formation, or in some cases, pay for skills. So they have 3 main grade 3s that come out in this set. There's actually 5 that come out, 6. These 6 cards come out in this set, but the big ones are Golden Beast Tamer, Nightmare Doll Alice, and Dark Lucius Robert. So let's talk about Robert first. This is their Mega Blaster, Soul Charge, gain 3k. If you have 6 more cards in Soul, gain 3,000 power. Vanguard, Rearguard, put all of your opponent's grade 1 or less into their Soul. It's an act, it just happens. It's really good. Like I said before, boosters are really good in this deck. I like Robert. You can build a version of him in the game. Next up is Golden Beast Tamer, which is probably their main grade 3 that you ride on, because it basically creates a gigantic beat stick deck, which is really cool. Vanguard, Rearguard, Restraint, which is bad, right? Oh, Restraint's very bad. Vanguard, Rearguard, Soul Blast 2, and Release from Restraint. This is permanent, by the way, so if you ride Vanguard and you release her Restraint, it's released forever. And then finally, during your turn, all your rearguards get plus 3k in the beginning of your turn. And then, when placed, I'll call a Chimera from your soul. Chimera basically means like an origin. So if you see right here, Barking Manicore has the Chimera down here. It's part of his like origin, or part of the card art. You can see that there's another Chimera right here. This card doesn't exist yet. This one does, though. Barking Cerberus, their 10k is a Chimera. So it's like a free unit basically on ride, which is pretty cool. Kind of like Alfred Early. And then finally, we have Nightmare Doll Alice, the triple rare for the set. One of them. Rearguard, when this unit attack hits a Vanguard, catalyze 1, put this unit into the soul, and call a card other than Nightmare Doll Alice from the soul. So you see what I'm saying here? Putting a card into the soul to call a card out. It's kind of like a toolboxy type of way to play. And the way that this kind of works is that you have a card like Golden Beast Tamer, who gives power to your front row. You put Alice in the soul after hitting, and then you have another unit coming out of the soul that gains power, is now boosted because you didn't attack with Alice boosted, you attacked with it by itself. You called it back out and you got another attack out of it. And if your opponent didn't get a defensive trigger, you're most likely going to hit them, which is pretty cool. Another really good key card in the deck is, of course, Purple Trapezist, which is a grade 1. When placed, put one of your other rearguards into your soul and call a card other than Purple Trapezist from your soul. So basically, when you call this card out of the soul, you can put a card that is maybe rested back in and then call something else back out. So you can basically make a column through calling one card from the soul, which is really powerful. That's why it's a triple rare. The deck is very interesting. I will say that the way the strategy basically works is it's kind of like a beat stick deck that has multiple attacks. It's basically the way it works in terms of the meta, and that's really strong. It's very consistent. It makes good numbers with cards like Crimson Beast Tamer and Turquoise Beast Tamer, wherever they are. So there's Crimson, and then Turquoise is up here somewhere, right there. And then you have cards like Presenter and Juggler that can soul charge and build up your soul. Two big problems that it has. Number one, defensive triggers. They exist, and once your opponent gets one, it basically shuts down your entire push turn, but that can be mitigated as long as you play correctly. You can actually, when that happens, conserve your resources, attack your opponent's rear guards, and then just move on with the game from there. Second big thing is that soul charging in this game, or sorry, soul blasting in this game sucks. It's random what you soul charge, and if you soul charge cards like Purple Trapezist, or I shouldn't say it's random, it soul charges whatever the game views as your most recent soul charge. So you're not really focused on soul charging as much as soul charging the correct cards. So once you get like a good set of cards in there that you want to just keep calling out over and over again to kind of beat sick your opponent, then you're done soul charging. I also recommend that you're done soul blasting. However, that makes any extra beast tamers you draw just dead cards. They just become dead cards because if you call them, you're going to lose combo potential. And that's a big hindrance right now that the deck has that kind of turns me away from how consistent it might be. However, I will say that overall, once you get your mana going and everything's working the way you want to, you can really pressure your opponent fast. Like if they're at 5 damage, they're just dead because you can get like 4 attacks in a turn. And this kind of guaranteed multi-attacking is a really powerful mechanic, and I'll get more into that maybe a little bit later. So yeah, guys, that's it pretty much for Pale Moon. It's basically the first guaranteed multi-attacking deck we have. Nova Clappers, while they do restand rear guards and get multi-attacks, they don't really guarantee anything. There's no effect that says guarantee standard card besides Rutile, and that's Counterblast too. This just kind of happens, you know, like if I call this card, I get a free card out of the soul, and I can manipulate my board and get powered thanks to cards like Golden Beast Tamer. It's really cool. This deck is really interesting, really simple, and honestly, I think will perform really well for a while here in set 2 and set 3, and when Lukier comes out in the future, it'll become really, really good, but that's for a future meta discussion that we don't need to talk about now. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the newest clan that's announced today in Cardfight Vanguard Zero. Alright guys, here it is, Spike Brothers. Now if you guys don't know what Spike Brothers are, they basically are the great divider when it comes to Cardfight Vanguard. You either love spikes or you really hate spikes. So I'm really excited to see who picks up this deck because they like it and who picks it up because they think it's good. First things first, let's talk about the big idea of this deck. First of all, you only get, I think 4 grade 3s exist. It's these 4 ones right here. These guys are the 4 that come out in the clan event. Seafried, Maximum, Skydiver, and United Attacker. Let's talk about what this deck wants to do. Similarly to Dark Irregulars and Pale Moon, it's almost like the Dark Zone cards are all related somehow. This deck uses Soul to achieve certain kinds of skills, but what they use the Soul for is to pay for costs that allow them to get multiple attacks during a turn, or better yet, more powerful attacks during their turn. And so the main shtick of this Spike Brothers deck is going to be multi-attacking, very specifically mid-battle superior calling. They don't really restand rear guards or call rear guards out of Soul, they just call cards from their hand or from the deck to attack again. And that's basically it. And you're probably saying to yourself, why is this better than Pale Moon? Well, the answer to that question is that cards like Juggernaut Maximum exist. Rear guard, when it attacks, Soul Blast 1 to activate, this unit gets power plus 5k until end of turn. This thing can give itself power, and then at the end of battle, return this unit on the bottom of the deck. This is a grade 3, which means it'll be a trigger, guys. It'll have a little trigger icon, which means if it goes back to the deck and you shuffle your deck, you just put a trigger back in your deck. There's no way that this card's not going to be the guaranteed 4 heal triggers like Ganslot is. No way. It's a recyclable grade 3. It's really, really powerful. And then you have cards like Seafried here, which is their main boss. When this unit's drive check a grade 3, call a card to open rear guard circle. That means a rear guard circle that doesn't have a unit on it. Well, guess what? This thing swings, goes to the bottom of the deck. There's now an open rear guard circle. I swing with this. Oh, look at that. A Maximum. Call it to the rear guard. Swing for 16k with a boost 22. Crazy. And then Vanguard, when boosted, power plus 2k until end of turn. These 2 cards are your bread and butter right here. These are going to be the best 2 cards in the deck. And sadly, they're both the triple rares, and you kind of need them, otherwise the deck just doesn't do anything. Like, a card like United Attacker is very bad, and this card, Skydiver, has no Vanguard skill. It's a great grade 3, but it's a really bad Vanguard because it has no skill. So yeah, that is these are the three big bosses here. Skydiver, Seafried, and Maximum. You can just forget about this card. Let's go ahead and talk about kind of other cards that are in this deck. We have a really good grade 2 in Bracky. Where is Bracky? Grade 2 Bracky. There it is. High C Bracky. Same thing as Maximum. Soul Blast, gain 5k, return to the deck. And then Devil Summoner, which is basically Trans Razor. When placed, call a grade 2 or less from the top of your deck. If you reveal a grade 1 or less, call it. Really, really good cards. Superior calling. And then finally, the best grade 1 in the deck, Assault Squad. It's basically Cray Soldier, but if you think about it, I boost with this, swing 22. Boom, this restands. I attack with Seafried. I superior call this from the top of the deck. Boom. 22 again. 2 22k attacks. Back to back. Even if your opponent gets a defensive trigger, that still hits. without any triggers happening. By the way, if you check this, it's also a trigger. So you can give the power to the freaking thing. So you call it, it's 27. Absolutely busted. So the deck is going to be really, really powerful because it basically is a mid-battle or multi-attacking deck that gives itself power. It plays around the gigantic problem that a lot of multi-attack decks have, which in this game is defensive triggers. So that's really, really powerful. Also with cards like Deadly Dan, you can Spirit Call without needing to check any grade 3s, and you can also just feed your soul, which feeds the cost for your skills, and the deck just has a lot of good resources at its hand. It has a Conroe clone. Its starter Mecha Trainer is a Conroe, so you can add PGs to your hand, which will be very consistent. This deck will be very powerful, very consistent, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, very popular. People are going to like playing big football dudes and just bash in face, and it's going to be crazy. Now, I haven't seen any lists for this deck at all, but I would imagine that it would just be a 9-draw, 4 heal type of deck. I could see stands working. I don't think they'd be good though, because you're already going to restand multi-attack anyway, and it would force you to like attack really awkwardly. So the best thing they're going to have is 9-draw, or I could see crits working out. I don't know what you would need them for, but okay. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts here on this deck and why it's powerful. It's basically this, like every reason why Pale Moon is powerful, this deck is powerful, but it also gains power by itself, and it is not really hurt by the soul blasting mechanic because it doesn't really matter what you soul blast in this deck, and there's no really cards that build soul, so you're not going to really worry about like soul charging any useful cards, because anytime you soul charge, it always comes from your hand and not from your deck, so you can pick what cards go in the soul. And once you get a Deadly Dan and a Assault Squad on board, you don't really need any more grade 1s besides maybe like Reckless Express, which is basically a grade 1 Bracky / Juggernaut. So yeah, it's a 12k attacker basically, which is pretty cool. So yeah, guys, this deck is really powerful. I'm going to talk more about like where it fits in the meta and how good it is once we get to the actual tier list part of the video, but I can say for sure that this, out of the 4 of these decks, is probably going to be the best one, and I'm including Dimension Release in that, because this deck has probably the most consistent engine and power and pressure out of any of them, and it's coming from just a clan event. That's all the support it has. I will say though that it will be a known thing, and it will be also the only version of the deck that exists, so it'll be kind of easy to play around once people figure out how to play around it. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and head into the actual tier list. Alright guys, here we are at the tierlistmaker.com. Fun fact, this is actually my first time ever making a tier list that I can actually visibly show you guys, and I'm really excited about that. If you guys want to make your own version of this tier list at home, I'll go ahead and leave a link to the template down below, but here it is, guys. We have, let me see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 archetypes. So these are classified by archetypes, not just by clans or by decks, it's by archetypes. So basically a type of deck that I think exists. The reason why I'm doing it this way is that if I showed you guys like deck lists or something for each one of them, A, I don't have those deck lists, and B, there's millions of ways to kind of build these decks. I'm just going to talk about a specific archetype of that deck. So let's go ahead and run through all these 19 one by one. First things first is Good Stuff Kagro. There's no Amber Dragons here because I believe that this is going to be the only one that people play with regularly on ranked. That's why it's here. Next up is Tsukiyomi. As you guys can see, I actually have, for some reason, 2 pictures of Tsukiyomi here. I'm using this one because it looks nicer, and that's why. We have Razors. We got Garmor. We got Original Soul Saver. This is also basically Good Stuff Paladins or Beatstick Paladins. CEO Amaterasu, basically Good Stuff OTT or Set 1 OTT stuff. We have Set 1 Novas, which includes anything with Rutile in it. We have Galahad, Stern, and Imperial Daughter, basically the 3 kind of less popular versions of the Set 2 decks that came out. We got Enigman, pure Dayusha, or just, you know, random stuff, you know, like Rain and like Miracle Beauty stuff will go here. We have Tamer, we have Robert, which is the Mega Blast that I showed you guys earlier. We have No Life King, which is the only version of DI that I've ever seen. We have Riviere from Bermuda Triangle. We have Reindeer for Bermuda Triangle. We have Basskirk for Granblue. And finally, we have Seafried for Spike Brothers, which is the only, these are the only 2 versions of these decks that exist that I know about. So yeah, guys, I'm going to take these decks, go one by one in this order of where I think they belong. I'm going to give my reasons why. And as I said before, the criteria that I'm using to judge where they go in this list is by popularity and by power, how powerful I think the decks are. I will explain why I think they're powerful, and then I'll, of course, justify maybe why they're popular. All right, so first things first, my favorite deck out of all these is Good Stuff Kagro, because I love Kagro. This is tier 1. Main reason why is that this deck puts in check all like these, like all the things that are fringe down here, which is basically like tier 1.5, is going to be checked by pretty much this deck. This is the gatekeeper of tier 1. You know, like he'll be the bottom of tier 1, but this is the gatekeeper. Cards like Draconic Overlord, cards like Waterfall, cards like Blockade are just so powerful that it just doesn't really matter what other cards you play. As long as you have those really good grade 3s, you can just constantly oppress your opponent. And playing 9 draw makes the deck super consistent. Retiring back rows makes the deck really strong. It's a really good advantage based deck. If you play the occasional Goku and they wipe out your back row, you know how hard it is to continue to aggress them. This deck is really powerful, and it's Kagero, one of the most popular decks in the game, and it's the only version of Kagero that's really viable besides Amber Dragons, and everyone's just kind of waiting until dope, but if you are a hardcore Kagero player, this is the deck you're playing, and there's a lot of hardcore Kagero players out there. Next up is probably Tsukuyomi. I said Tsukuyomi was like the second best deck last time. This deck is definitely better than Overlord, so I'm putting it here. Yeah, I mean, if you've played against this deck at all on the ladder right now, you'll know how strong it is. Being able to stack your deck, get guaranteed triggers, thin your deck out through the right chain, gain advantage through your actual skills of drawing cards, and get consistent boards and guaranteed wins with Silent Tom is just stupid. This deck is really powerful, and that power alone makes it tier 1. However, it's also really popular because anyone that considers himself really competitively minded at this game wants to play this deck because they want to outsmart their opponent. And I will say though, it's less popular than the top 1 pick, or the best deck in my opinion, which is Razors. And the sole reason why Razors beats out Tsukuyomi is not because I believe Razors is more powerful than Tsukuyomi, it's because I think Razors is more popular than Tsukuyomi. And the main reason why is because I said earlier that competitively minded or really hardcore players love playing Tsukuyomi. Not everyone's a hardcore player, not everyone's a big brain, not everyone wants to think like twice as hard during all their games. They want to just like turn cards sideways and win the game, and that's Razors, man. Razors create so much natural advantage and aggression that it's honestly insane. The deck is literally pressure deck, and if you just want to turn cards sideways and win the game, you can, and that's how strong the deck is. And these 3 right here are the biggest contenders for tier 1, no questions asked. And in my opinion, it goes Razors, Tsukuyomi, and then Good Stuff Kagero. I think Good Stuff Kagero, though, if piloted correctly, can beat both these decks. I think its hardest time, though, is against Tsukuyomi. Razors is pretty 50-50 in my experience. By the way, let me make a quick little thing here. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but every deck on here is playable. Like, even the tier 3 decks aren't like awful. They're not like F tier, you know, they're not unplayable. The reason why they're tier 3 is maybe because they're not that popular and you won't see them that much and they won't really affect the meta, but they are still good and they can still definitely win the game. It's just they're not as powerful maybe as the ones on tier 1 or as popular as the ones on tier 1. I'm not saying that anything here, none of these decks are bad in my opinion. Everything here is playable, everything here can win, everything in here can get you to Legend 50 as far as I'm concerned. And that's the great thing about Vanguard, is that even though decks might not be as powerful, as long as you know what you're doing and you want to play these decks, you can win with them. You can win with anything. So yeah, just want to get that out of the way right now. All right, moving on to the first fringe deck, we got Garmor. I just made a deck profile about Garmor literally yesterday, and I said how good I thought the deck was and how good its matches were against decks like Razors, against Tsukuyomi, not so good against Kagero obviously, but it's better than other decks. The reason why it's fringe is because while it is a really powerful deck, it's not necessarily the most consistent in terms of drawing or in terms of actual achieving of goals. Like, unless you have the whole deck built in for Garmor and like you want your draw triggers and you want some kind of outside advantage strategy, the deck isn't really consistent and it doesn't draw PGs is the big problem. So it loses to a lot of like fringe stuff, like DP is a pretty tough matchup. Grand Blue is a really tough matchup because you just can't push through and aggress them enough. Decks like Pale Moon can be hard because they can just push you and push you and push you and they don't care about your intercepts. So while it is a really powerful deck and can probably hold its own against the tier 1 decks, it can't really hold its own against other ones. And again, it's not as popular as these 3, so there's no real point in saying that's tier 1 because it just isn't. It is tier 1.5 though and can definitely hold its own against them for sure. Next up, we're going to move into the older sets. We got Good Stuff Paladins. I'm going to put this at tier 2, mainly because it has the same problems that Garmor has, but it has less defensive powers, and against a really, in this meta right now, guys, is super aggression based. Whoever can create more aggression against their opponent is what's going to win most of the time. And because this deck, while it can create a lot of aggression, can't really create a lot of defense because it just has no way to get PGs or consistently have always grade 2s in the front row. It just kind of like dies faster than Garmor, and that's why it's a little bit worse. Next up is CEO, aka Good Stuff OTT. I'm just going to put this a little bit above Good Stuff Paladins. I think this deck is still as good as it always is. Tom plus Gemini is going to be a really good finishing combo that will win you games. But honestly, if you're not playing Tsukuyomi, what are you doing? Like, your deck doesn't really do anything besides drawing cards and cycling through things. Like, Tsukuyomi can create gigantic board advantages in game states where you just can guarantee wins which is pretty crazy. This takes time to do that, so it's not as good as this, and it has all the same problems as this. It's not as good as it, and has all the same problems, so I just don't see it being anywhere close to the tier 1 spots. Next up is good stuff Novas. I'll actually put this pretty much on par and fringe. Like, this deck is as good as it's always been. Assura Kaiser plus Stand Triggers plus Rutile plus Lion Heat can just achieve so much damage and so much aggression every single turn. That's kind of insane. So you can keep up with decks even without having set 2 cards. I will say that having access to cards like Perfect Razor and the extra crit aggression, or just Blouse in general, is probably still better. But being able just to constantly not need to update your decks and just swing at your opponent's rear guards and then swing at their face is really nice. Alright, moving on to the kind of the newer stuff, but still not as, you know, expensive really, the kind of budget builds from set 2 and set 3. We got Galahad, who is, in my opinion, just as good as Garmor. In fact, I'm working right now on building a hybrid list between these two, and I'm really excited to see what it does. I think the hybrid might be better than both of them separately, which is really weird to think about. But yeah, Galahad is basically Royal Paladin Razors, because it basically achieves the same thing that Razors do, but for more resources like Counterblast and stuff like that. But it can use other things like Soul Saver Dragon because it has a lot of soul, or it can use other effects that can gain power, or it can have Royal Paladin things and have Gancelot. So it has its own, you know, unique and special things about it, but it basically at its core is just a very aggressive crit-based kind of Royal Paladin deck, which is worse than just a Razor deck, but it's still really good, especially if you want to play a cheap version of Razors. Next up is Blouse. I would say Blouse is definitely, by the way, this is actually better than Novas in my opinion, but this is definitely better than good stuff Novas, so I'm going to put it like this for now. But Blouse is basically going to be kind of your Vanguard-centric Nova Grappler deck / your very budget Nova Grappler deck. Even more budget than this one, because it's all double rares and lower pretty much in this one. And if I were to recommend a deck to anybody, it'd be one of these two, Galahad or Blouse, for free-to-play players, because it's so easy to build this, and it can get you as high as you ever want to go in the game. And it just is really fun, and you have a lot of cool combos, like cards like, you know, Toolkit Boy plus Blau to achieve like basically 5 Vanguard attacks in one turn. You get to keep your drive check every single time you do it, and I've seen someone go from like 2 to 6, you know, in a game of Blouse, and that's just like so crazy to me. And so the deck is just really powerful, and it's really popular because a lot of people are free to play. So if you don't have Razors, you're going to be playing Blouse, and Nova Grappler is just as popular as ever. So Blouse is definitely going to be on the fringe for me. Also, a big thing to note here is that it can beat Tsukuyomi, and it can also beat Razors. I've lost to Blouse before using my Razor deck, and it's really strong. The only thing keeping it out of being tier 1 isn't that it's not like expensive or has good cards in it. It's that it requires way more resources than Razors do to win the game. You need Counterblast 2, discarding 2 cards from hand. You need to have hit. Like it just is a lot more conditional than these decks. These decks just do what they want to do and no one cares. This deck requires a lot of stuff to go right. It's also a right chain, which I know you think makes it more consistent, but it kind of does take away from stuff, because if you don't get access to your Enigma and Ripple, sorry, not Enigma and Ripple, your Blau Panzer, you're not going to be able to go up guaranteed to Stern, and then you're forced to ride Rutile, which in this meta is nowhere near as strong as riding Stern Blau Gluer. No way. Also, losing out potentially on your 11k base could hurt you in terms of the defensive blowback. Also, a big problem that Novas have in general is good defensive columns. That's why I have Garmor up here, because I think Garmor does beat Blouse more than Blouse beats Garmor, and that's because Garmor is just such a defensive deck that it just like stops Blouse in its tracks, and that's really good. And finally, we have everyone's favorite deck to hate right now, Imperial Daughter. Where does Steven, a known control player, place the control deck? Well, I'll tell you, random citizen, at tier 3. This deck, okay, so this deck is at tier 3. Not because it's bad, not because it's not popular, because no one's gonna ever really play this deck. I mean, I know someone, I'm a hardcore control player, and once I build this deck, I will play it a little bit on ranked, but whether or not I'm gonna continue playing it is up for debate. Another big thing that I don't think people are realizing is every time someone has complained about Imperial Daughter decking them out, or keeping them from attacking, or running out of triggers against this deck, I ask them the same question: what were you playing? And they'll say, oh, I was playing Tsukuyomi. Oh, I was playing OTT. Oh, I was playing Good Stuff Paladins. Oh, I was playing Dimension Police. Oh, even worse, I was playing Dark Irregular. I was playing Grand Blue. This deck is designed to beat decks that don't have 21k columns. It doesn't even beat 2 of the top tier decks. It's not even good at being a control deck, because a control deck is supposed to beat every deck in the meta by playing the game a different way and forcing your opponent to have the resources they need to achieve a win. Razors have that. Overlord, Good Stuff Kakaro, has it. Tsukimi doesn't really have it. So it only really beats the one out of these three big decks. And frankly, if you ask me, it's a pretty not popular deck. Like, I've played it probably once or twice. I know people who play it a lot. I always ask them, like, what are you playing, or where are you playing, like what rank are you in. Like, it's also like your mileage may vary on how many Imperial Daughters you fight, but I will say that in general, I don't think this kind of deck is something you should worry about in terms of your ranked play, because as long as you're playing a deck like Garmor or Galahad even, or Razors or Overlord, or Deep Police even, like, you're not gonna be worried about this card. And if you are worried about playing against this deck, switch decks. Like, if you really want to beat it, you just can by playing a different deck. Like, that's really the answer to the question there as to if I want to beat Imperial Daughter or why is Imperial Daughter so good. It's because you're playing the wrong deck to beat it. Or you have the wrong cards in your deck. There are plenty of cards. Like, I'm playing Sakuyas right now in my Tsukimi list, and I have not lost to an Imperial Daughter since. I just ride Sakuya, boost it with Blue Eye, 21k every single turn. Boom. So I definitely think that Imperial Daughter, while it is powerful and interesting and really consistent, it's not really a control deck because it doesn't really control anything, and it also is not that popular at all unless you want to just like hit yourself and think really hard and be, big brain, which I've said earlier, people aren't really big brain on this game right now. Just not right now. We'll get more big brains once we get the Japan and English servers, merged. But moving on, let's talk about the set 3 clans and where they fit. First up is D-Police. Obviously, this deck is going to be Fringe. However, it will be better than Nova's, but less better than Blau's. Reason why is, again, popularity. This deck is brand spanking new, and it requires a lot of triple rares to be really good. So, a deck like Blau's, which is more budget friendly, is going to be easier for people to build, thus being more popular. That's why it's a little bit lower. However, I think all these decks pretty much here, besides maybe Nova's, are equal in power and, ability to win games, but not equal in terms of popularity or in terms of viability in the meta. That's why this deck is number 1 still, because this deck is the most viable one of all these. But I do think Galahad and Garmor can easily switch off if they need to. Not gonna lie. I just like Garmor more though, personally, so that's why it's up here. It's still my list. And finally, we just have random stuff DP, because Enigman Rain and Dayusha are good cards. I think this one just goes down here because it's more resource intensive than this one, so it's just inherently worse, and that's why it goes down here. But there's still kind of the same idea though as to why. And it's bigger than these one. Is it actually better than ODG? No, actually no. Yeah, it goes here. Better than this one though, because this one generates way more pressure than this does naturally, and thus the games last a lot shorter. Thus you don't really need defensive power. This one, the games last a long time, and you need that defensive power, so that's why it's still lower. Next up is Pale Moon. I kind of already alluded to this, but it's Fringe. It's really good, really consistent. Having access to really good beat stick decks are really strong. I think this is a little bit worse. So let's talk about these. The Golden Beast Tamer, beat stick style deck, is really powerful, but it loses to triggers. So it can just get really unlucky and really consistent. Also, again, new deck, hard for people to play. Also, not as good as Nova Grappler in terms of power. So if you want to play a multi-attack deck, you play Nova Grappler, or you'll play Spectators when they come out. The only people playing Pale Moon right now are the diehard Pale Moon fans and the people that pull a bunch of Pale Moon cards for no reason. It's not that popular, but it is very powerful, and it is worth fearing because it can just beat you if you get unlucky. Also, another thing that's kind of keeping it from tier 1 is that it does have some consistency issues in drawing its pieces, because it requires a lot of pieces, and Soul Charging Man really gave it the Soul Blasting Man really gave it the shaft. Losing your key cards from your soul is the worst thing that could ever happen to this deck. So it's just not worth it sometimes to even bother Soul Blasting for your restraint, which means you can't restrain, or you don't have any skills anymore because you ran out of cards in soul because you had to unrestrain yourself. So it really is not the most consistent, but it is powerful. It's still good, and it's still worth a 1.5 spot. Next up is Robert. Robert is a budget version of the deck with 0 outs and stuff. It just has no way to win, but it could still win and be cheesy and survive long enough to kill your opponent. So that's why it goes in tier 2, but it'll probably not be that popular at all. But you know what? Actually, the more I think about it, it's tier 3. It's tier 3. As much as I love a 1 or 2 tech of Robert in the actual list, a full-on Robert deck is just not gonna cut it, Chief. Not gonna cut it. All right. Next up, Irregulars, tier 3. No one's playing it. and I don't even know how powerful it is. You know, like I said, I was bagging on it a lot earlier. I will say though, in the future when we get Reiji tier 1, but for now tier 3, because there's just no way to. There's no winning image. Like, I don't know how you win with the deck, and if I can't give you guys a winning strategy to like beat your opponent with consistently, I'm just not going to recommend the deck. And I think the tier 3 decks are definitely decks I don't recommend people trying because they'll be the hardest to win with. But if you're a DI hardcore fan, build it and prove me wrong, please. I just don't know what to say. Moving on, we got Riviere and Reindeer, tier 2 and tier 1.5, a little bit better than this. So first thing's Reindeer. Basically, it's Soul Saver Dragon on attack and Persona Blast, which is cool. And if you play stand triggers, you can be really neat and get a lot of damage done. But I've said this before about Bermuda Triangle. Their mechanic is just bad. So like their mechanic doesn't really do anything for them in this game other than achieving their skills, and so that's bad. So like bouncing cards in your hand is cool. In the real game, you get to have extra shield and pressure, but in this game, all it really does is fix your formations, which if you're a good player, you'll not make bad ones in the first place. So there's that. Also, the deck requires a lot of triple rares, and while it may be very popular because everyone loves Bermudas, it will not be played that much, even though it's popular. That's why it's tier 2. Now, the better version is Reindeer, and the only reason Reindeer's up here is because it's the best version of the deck, and it by nature is as good as, you know, Good Stuff Novas. So if I put Good Stuff Novas up here, I have to put this up here too, because it's just going to be, it might even be more popular than Good Stuff Novas in theory, because there'll be more people playing Reindeer than playing only like set 1 Novas. So that's what I'm going to have to say here. It basically is set 1 Novas, but a little bit better because it can play around Kagero technically, which is pretty cool. But other than that though, and I got nothing else to say about the deck. I haven't tested it that much. I haven't seen it being played that much, but it is powerful. It has its own right to be in the fringe, but whether or not it makes waves is up to you. Mileage may vary. All right. Next up is Bad Streak, aka the Grand Blue deck, and I honestly don't know where to put this because it feels like this deck is really popular for some reason. Like I have fought it as many times as I fought Garmor. So, and it's very similar to Garmor in that it's very defensive, but it has no real win condition outside of just outlasting your opponent, which, you know, if you're fighting against the Razors, you're not going to outlast them. If you're fighting against Tsukuyomi, they're going to outlast you. If you're fighting against Kagero, they're just going to kill your dudes and kill you anyway. So, like, it's hard for me to justify how powerful this deck is, and it's kind of unknown to me how popular it is. I think people are just playing it because they have the cards, and it's like a complete deck. And it's still really good, but I don't know where to put it in tier 2 or fringe. I think Nova's is better than it, so I guess I'll put it here. It's like the worst of the fringe decks, because it's basically bad Garmor, but has an 11k Vanguard. That's about it. Like that's the most redeeming thing I can give it, is that Exceed is 11k. So, yeah, that's all I can say about Grand Blue. I was kind of disappointed in Grand Blue's performances over these past few weeks. We'll say though that it surprisingly holds its own. Like it will win a game against like Razors. It'll win a game against like Royals for sure. Oh, it beats the pants off of Royals actually. It'll beat DP. It'll beat Stern. But it can also just lose, and it loses to all these things pretty much most of the time. So, in terms of power, it's the same as it's been in last set, and in terms of popularity, unknown to me. So it's hard for me to say just how tier it is, but I'm just gonna put it at the bottom of fringe because I feel like that's the most accurate place for me to put it. If I was being like, if I knew more about it, I think I could confidently say that it was better or worse than these decks, but I just can't say it for now. So it's just the bottom of the fringe. And finally, where do I think Spike Brothers will go? This might surprise you guys, but I think Spike Brothers is tier 1 because I kind of alluded to this. It's basically the best of all the multi-attacking decks that we have. Set 1 Razors, Golden Beast Tamer. It is the most consistent of them because it plays around defensive triggers, and better yet, it can increase its consistency with cards like Juggernaut Maximum and Mecha Trainer. So it doesn't really need a draw engine to achieve its goals. Plus, it plays around cards like Kagero or decks like Kagero because it just puts its units back in the deck, and it gets superior call. So what's really cool is like its main resource for achieving its skills is free because it's soul blasting. Its main way of achieving consistency is its grade 0s and just drawing cards and playing whatever you want because you can superior call things. And its main way of dealing pressure is multi-attacking, but multi-attacking through gaining power at the same time, so you can play around defensive triggers and achieve a really good, like 3 attacks every single turn that always hit. Could you imagine how good that sounds? Also, Spike Brothers will be a clan event, which means every single person will have a chance to build the entire deck for free if they grind for the next, like, what, 5 or 6 days it is, maybe even 10 days, actually. And that's going to be insane. Also, there were a lot of ride or dies for Spike Brothers, so I expect all those people just to play it and never stop. So that's what I'm thinking about this. That's why I think it's really good. And then there's a second Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi is so good, we'll put it in here twice. So yeah, guys, that'll do it for this meta discussion. I hope I helped you guys out in trying to figure out what the best decks are. If I had to give a recommendation as the best deck to build right now, starting from scratch, I would give these 3 recs. I would say start with Galahad or Blouse, work your way up to getting Overlord, and if you're starting literally today, build Seafree while you're at it, because these 4 decks are going to last you the entire month of May, and because you're building Kagero, you'll have a good lead into set 4 meta, which will be June, with building Dote, which will be one of the best decks for this game for a while. So that's my glaring recommendation if you want to start and become a competitive player from the get-go with this game. And you guys, if you have any questions about this deck list that I made or any of the opinions that I share with you guys here today, please just leave them down in the comments below. I will be happy to answer them. Or better yet, come into my Twitch channel. I go live every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon, Pacific Standard Time, and I love answering y'all's questions and helping you get better at this game that I love very much. But as always, I have been your True Champion, Steven. Always got to work hard, rest easy, and live well, and I will see you all next time. Peace.